they approved unanimously for the annexation of some property and rezoning of some property. And maybe before we get into that, if you want to just review the process that happens moving forward.
When annexation is by petition of owners or electors of a property, it's done by an ordinance, and it takes 3/4 of the qualified electors or 3/4 of the owners of the property to be annexed. There are 3/4 of the assessed value of the property must join the petition, and that's what we have. And the annexation in that case is done by an ordinance where we'll have a first reading and a second reading, just like we do all the time when we vote on consider ordinances. But the Planning Commission at their meeting recommended that there be additional property included in the annexation, which was not part of what was initially petitioned, which can be done, but before you take any action on it, there must be a notice published in the paper one time. And the notice is to the owners of the property that are being asked to be included in the annexation, plus the township as well. So my thought is we could have the notice put in the paper between now and the next meeting, and the ordinance could be drafted. We would have to leave out the property that the Planning Commission said should be in there, because I don't know if it's going to be included or not. That's up to you. And if it is, we could change the proposed ordinance between the first and the second reading to include that additional property.
And then there would be public input at both the first and second readings of the.
Yes. Yeah.
But we do have a recommendation. Does any of the commissioners have any questions of Tom regarding the process?
Why don't you go over the public input for both readings?
Well, on the second reading of the ordinance, of course, it's discussed and voted on, but on the first reading of the ordinance, there's little discussion, but there would be discussion on adding those additional properties to the annexation. That's what the discussion would be.
Only on the additional part?
Well, yes, and then there's some persons whose property owners that I believe their property is included would have the opportunity to voice their approval or disapproval to be annexed to the city.
So actually it'd be pretty much two opportunities prior to the vote being taken for it. Again, we have a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and I'll try to read through this legal description and everything for the record. The Devils Lake Planning and the Commissioners have in their packets. This one here, if I can. It's gonna take a minute for it to load up this. Either the Wi-Fi is slow or my computer's slow. There we go. And you want to follow through. I really can't. Okay, a memo dated December 30th, 2014, from the Planning Commission to the City Commission. The Devils Lake Planning Commission took action at their December 18th, 2014 meeting to recommend the City Commission approve and file the petitions received requesting annexation for parcels described as the north 1/2 of section 20, northwest 1/4 and southeast 1/4 of section 20, outlot 44-0002 and section 20, outlot 44-0003 and section 29, north 1/2, northeast 1/4, less the railroad, RR, I assume railroad, and tracks in section 29. Southeast 1/2, northeast 1/4, less RR, road right-of-way and tracks of section 29, 66 wide strip of the section line between section 28 and section 29 from the north right-of-way right-of-way line of 50th Street Northeast to the south right-of-way line of Highway 2. The owners of the north half and the northwest 1/4, southeast 1/4 of section 20 stated that the request for annexation and change in zoning is contingent upon the purchase and development of the land by Eagles Ledge LLP. They also took action to recommend approval of changing the zoning from agriculture to heavy industrial for the north one half of section 20, northwest one quarter, southeast one quarter of section 20, outlot 42-0002 in section 20, and outlot 44-003 in section 29. If the annexation of the north one half of section 20 and the northwest one quarter and southeast one quarter of section 20 does not proceed, the zoning would stay as agriculture. After discussion, the Planning Commission took further action to recommend to the city that the City Commission takes the necessary steps to include the northeast one quarter, southeast one quarter of section 20, the west 33 feet of section 21, and the west 33 feet of section 28, lying north of Highway 2 in the annexation request. And we have the annexation petition signed by the Herbert family. We have the annexation request that was signed by Forward Devils Lake and Helen Weed and Robert Weed, and then from CHS property, Mark Breakmeyer, I believe is the name. Is that accurate? Okay. And that's for Central State Harvest States. Central Harvest States. So that is the request that we have in front of the commission this evening. And what would happen if the request were approved? The city attorney would be directed to draw up the ordinance that would include all this information in them. And then we'd have a reading next meeting, the second meeting in January, and then we'd have the second and final hearing on the first meeting in February. And there may be changes from the first to second depending on if the other parcels included. Is that accurate now?
And then direct me to publish the notice in the paper
And to do the notices.
regarding the additional property.
So, commissioners, anyone have any questions on the request and the information that was presented from the Planning Commission?
There's a map here within your packets, and that map would show the area that we have that requested annexation. And it also shows then the area that the Planning Commission will recommend be included with the annexation.
That's this new one that you just had on our desk tonight, right?
Well, it's in your packet, but Commissioner Heisler wanted it printed, he wanted a hard copy because sometimes the PDFs take a long time to load, as we found out. So you wanted to have that available, and that's colored, so you have the requested annexation that went forward. Everybody, all the owners of that property signed the annexation request. Planning Commission had recommended, after reviewing it, looking at it, they recommend that the area of Blue be included. The property owners that are within the area of Blue have not been contacted. I believe one of those property owners is here. They haven't been contacted because the City Commission hasn't reviewed it and whether or not you agree with the Planning Commission's request or not.
So when you talk about the property in blue, we're not just talking about that 40-acre chunk. We're also talking about that section line. Is that a section line?
There's a section line there. The property west of the section line would be included with the original annexation, other than that 40-acre parcel that's cross-section blue. But then there's discussion related to the 33 feet east of the section line. Those would be adjoining property owners that haven't been contacted at this point. The idea is utilizing the section line corridor, that 66 feet, for water, sewer, and roadway installation. There is a lot adjacent to the railroad tracks in the very south tip of the map. There's a lot there that is owned, and that lot was platted all the way up to the section line. So that may be handled a little bit, have to be handled a little bit differently. At this point, I did visit with the local surveyor and trying to get things laid out related to where the section line actually fits. Where is the section line, where is the property line, and get some topography there, what are the utilities, and you know, some of the trees, I don't know if you were contacted, if the surveyor went in there to tie in some of the trees, to see where the trees sit relative to the section line, and how, if we have to put in water, we have to put in sewer, how all that would fit within that corridor, and what's available if we end up having to shift things over slightly or what have you, just to see those options. And I don't know where the section line is specifically. I mean, I know it's in that area, but I don't know how it sits relative to trees or roadways or railroad crossings, things of that nature.
But that is the goal, to shift it a little bit to the west so that we don't have to infringe on that 33 feet of the other side of that section line. Is that is kind of our goal or option we're looking at?
I think it's an option. I think the 33 feet that's adjacent to the lot, that may be handled a little bit differently than the rest. I mean, if there's trees that can be within a boulevard area or something and not disturbed, or if we can adjust slightly to save some trees, if that's the goal, you know, I would think that we would try and do that. If it means putting utilities on the other side of the road, I think we would try and do that. But without knowing exactly where the section line is, where the trees are, and how things fit, I can't answer that. Outside that lot, however, you know, that 33 foot on each side of the section line corridor is what you would typically use, that, you know, that reserved right, that easement for developing the access. It's just a little bit different when it's been platted up to the section line. And the lot's been platted up to the section line, subdivision.
See, there's solutions in there.
There's some. And that's not to say that infrastructure, water, sewer, streets, you know, as outlined in the map, this is not to say that that roadway is going to be improved this year or next year, all the way to the, right now it's laid out all the way to the truck route, which would be the north end of the annexation strip. It's just taking it all in as part of the annexation, so that as things develop, it's annexed, you improve that corridor, you extend the water, you extend the sewer to the point that you need the services. But there are sloughs in the, you know, there are things that would have to be, as you go farther north along that section line, that you would have to review, and whether or not you would choose to go around a slough or through a slough. You know, you'd have to get necessary permits for impacting wetlands, things of that nature. And whether it makes economic sense to go around or go through without survey. And I think some of that is some distance in the future. You know, visiting with Rachel, the industrial park, the proposed industrial park, that annexation request is, they're requesting that move forward irrespective of the refinery property. And so if that annexation request goes forward, then there's going to be discussion at the commission level for Devil's Lake about timeframes for the industrial park. Whether the development of the industrial park and that infrastructure will continue and those improvements be made this year, next year, that's, review that and provide some direction.
So moving forward then, if we approve the recommendation from the planning commission, if that was the wishes of the commission, then they would be invited, the affected property owners would be invited to our next, we'd have a first reading next meeting. Right? You'd have it prepared for the next meeting. So they'd be invited to that to give us their input.
That would be the public hearing. I'd work with Tom on drafting whatever notification is required.
But let's just talk a little bit about that section line. You have a section line, and you're talking about all the property to the west is this property that wants to be annexed into the city. But then you're also saying with that section line, you want the other 33 feet on the east side, or on the, well, I don't know what side you want, on the other side to also be included in this annexed property, on the thought that you would utilize that corridor for infrastructure? And that's the, you just can't go up to the property line and annex the property that we want into the city, and that be the end, the edge. Is that always, I mean, it just doesn't, I guess I haven't been around where we've annexed property, and we've also then, also took the property, the 33 feet on the other side, just as a, I don't know, call it a buffer or as a potential corridor.
Any township property a mile line, the builder has the right 33 feet from the center of the road in either direction. The government has the right, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, to build a road. I think that's been,
If it's a section line.
if it's a section, yes. And that's what we're trying to maybe work around that a little bit on this. There's a situation developing where could we possibly move it over to the west a little bit? Well, that's down the road quite a bit here yet, but we have the right on that section line, 33 feet from the center to go east and west to build a road there. County's been doing that forever.
Other
And
than that-
townships, and townships.
Other than potentially that lot, we'd have to have discussions on the lot because it was subdivided, I think, up to the section. But the other, most roadways, when they're developed, the section line is the center of the roadway. And that corridor is used, so if you did it a different way, then, you know, one property owner would be giving up more property in order to develop the infrastructure. Yet, when the other side develops, that could be sometime down the road, but if it develops, then they would be utilizing that infrastructure without, you know, sharing in its development. It's not to say that things can't be adjusted and shifted slightly in an area to avoid specific impacts. But typically, we would follow section.
Until we get it surveyed, until we can see what's
And the
there.
answer, I'm sorry.
Until we can see what's there, what kind of impact it would have, we really don't know yet.
And without knowing where the other utilities
Right.
are sitting there and what our requirements are, how everything's going to be laid out with the lots, the blocks, the things within the industrial park, as well as the requirements for the oil refinery. You know, how big are the pipes going to be?
It's where a road actually goes, sometimes it isn't the section line, you know, it's jogged over for whatever reason.
Currently, the annexation request, you know, in order to make it contiguous to the city as well, we're connecting to the industrial park. So on the south end of the map, the industrial park, in this case, is the Department of Transportation yard. That's there, that's the lot that we're connecting with. Right now, the annexation request is to follow that section line down to the DOT, which is included within city limits, as well as Alter Green and those other properties. Now, whether we choose to take that section line corridor, which is outlined, 33 feet either side, our infrastructure may not fit within that 33-foot corridor. Because we wouldn't want to bore water, sewer right underneath the approaches. We go off to the side of the approaches and then auger underneath. I don't know if it necessarily matters whether our infrastructure is within city limits or outside city limits, because it's highway right of way in that particular case. But whether we wanted to annex additional highway right of way in order to ensure we have enough property to put all our infrastructure within city limits, I don't know if there's we'd be doing it by permit through the DOT anyway, so I don't know if it matters. But one idea was to take the westerly edge of the Department of Transportation property, which is the black line that's shown on your map, and extend that straight north. That would just be a matter of, do you take on a little more highway right away or not? That's something that we'd have to sort through in working with the Department of Transportation. But it has to connect, so we need either that 66 feet, 33 feet either side of the section line to cross Highway 2, or on one side, we extend it a little bit farther and go north. There wouldn't be any additional private land, it would all be highway right away, that additional strip.
I think the goal that we're trying to get to is to lessen the impact on the residents in that area. Isn't that basically what we're hoping to do?
Hope so.
And I think that's what, we're trying to do by keeping the utilities on the west side of that.
Correct.
make every effort to try to do that if we can. And engineers tell me they can do anything.
If the commission's willing to pay for it, we can do it.
Well, we did it with the water line.
Yeah.
You know, our water line, our main water line coming from the southwest of here, or southeast of here. It's not on the right way over the shoulder, it's way out in the field, the majority of it. We just had to work with landowners to do that, and that's what we're gonna try to do here too. Why not? You know, if we need to.
The issue with the roadway is that, you know, a lot of the, like the railroad crossings are in place. They're in place according to the section line. It's costly to adjust and move those. Not to say that they can't be moved, push one direction, but without having a survey, you know, I just don't know, once we have that survey laid out, we can have some discussions. I think you know, in looking at it, the area adjacent to a lot where somebody lives, you'd want to minimize impacts there to the extent practical. Other than that, you have an open section line north of there that will be open for development. But, I mean, that's decisions that can be made as we go through the process. The idea behind the annexation is ultimately, I believe this is going to be platted. And platted, you're going to have the right-of-way identified in the plat. And that right-of-way on the plat is where you put water, sewer, streets. And so we have to define where that's going to be. I had looked briefly at relocating the entire roadway, the entire access a little bit farther to the west, but that's going to be very difficult and costly, rather than utilizing existing crossings.
Okay, is there any other discussion on the recommendation from the planning commission? If not, what is the wishes of the commission? And once again, this gets us to the next step.
Motion.
To approve the recommendation of the planning commission and direct Tom
To direct me to draw the ordinance and
Notice.
attend to the publication of the notice of the hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the recommendations of the planning commission and have city attorney be directed to draw up the ordinance and present proper notifications to the meeting or to the, I guess, the official newspaper. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I think one important part of this is contingent upon the purchase and development of the land, and I think that's got a lot to do with what we're doing here. So just want to make sure that is mentioned in the motion.
And we're kind of making assurances, even though we're annexing 33 feet of somebody's property in anticipation of a road going in, is our intent to not try to avoid taking that 33 feet and moving the road if possible, so that we don't take their property.
I think that's part of the lessen the impact, negative impact on the residents, what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I would certainly do that.
So we're annexing, but we're also indicating that we're gonna try to accommodate
Right.
that property.
We could work with it in that entire stretch in this annexation, so.
Does the commission have any thoughts related to the crossing Highway 2, whether it's a 66-foot wide strip or as wide as the DOT parcel? And that is something that, after consulting a little closer with the DOT and the attorney, could be adjusted slightly there.
Well, being what is gonna be, if everything works out as we're looking at this, those intersections need to be relatively wide anyway. Correct.
The intersections are there and they basically cover the entire 66 feet, 33 feet either side. The idea is if we're looking at pushing things farther west, probably the one that annexation maybe a little bit wider. I don't believe it really matters, because on the north side it is wider. You know, if you look at your map, the requested annexation, the CHS property is included within the annexation. It's just on the south side adjacent to the DOT property. And there's some strange things going on with real estate on the south end that Gary had, he spent quite a lot of time, I think, reviewing maps and trying to identify who owns what, because it's fairly complicated on the south side of the highway. And just today he found out that he believes the Department of Transportation owns all the way up to the right of way. So it would be an additional annexation strip would simply be highway right of way.
What is the idea of annexing that CHS property, this little strip here, that's not really part of the industrial park? That's CHS property, and then in the past, they've piled up soybeans and product right there in that corner. Is there gonna be an impact to them, the annexation of that parcel, and why is it just a half of that and not all of it, the whole distance of the proposed industrial park? What was the thought there of annexing that little chunk?
I didn't meet with CHS direct, but they signed the petition requesting the annexation.
Okay.
It was zoned heavy industrial, so they have this property that's outside city limits that's zoned heavy industrial. I think they feel that they can benefit from being included with the annexation, be benefited by potentially getting the services, the water and sewer, the roadways that would be improved within that area as part of some improvements. I don't know, Rachel, if you
And the
had.
main thing was just to keep it continuous to keep it, city continuous, to jump across the highway there. So we had to annex their piece in to connect to Fort Delaware property.
And I believe that chunk is already
It's heavy
its own heavy industrial
Yep,
already? Yeah.
correct, yep, so they just need the annex.
It's surprising the other day, but they looked at it as heavy industrial.
So you're saying, Rachel, they're kinda on board, they have no problems at all?
No, it's
Annexing
just a matter
part
of
their
paperwork,
industrial park.
yeah, to help us get our property annexed in as industrial park of the city.
We have a motion and a second, do we not? Any further discussion? So the motion being that we accept the recommendation of the planning commission and direct Mr. Trainer to draw up the ordinance for our first reading at our second meeting in January and do the notifications. Any other discussion?
And if we have to widen that annexation on the south side, I can bring that forward to the next meeting.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign, hearing none, motion carries. Okay, moving on to the next order of business, we have a multi-family housing